Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini, qui fecit caelum et terram. All right, so all of you are aware, I'm sure, of the declaration of the three bishops that was released on June 27th, 2013. When you first hear it and you first read it, it actually sounds, it's got, Vatican II, religious liberty, ecumenism, the council, texts, reign of Christ. But then, when you restudy it, you discover it's actually more hideous and more deceptive than even the April 15th document. On the positive side, it lays out the new doctrine of the Society of St. Pius X, which basically is Vatican II can be surmountable, religious liberty is not too huge of a deal, ecumenism is, can be worked with, and basically we can pretty much go along to get along. That's the underlying message of this wet noodle document. But I want to stress today, I think all this is built on one of the huge modernist principles, which is called historicism. Does anybody have an idea what historicism is? It's a big word, that historicism. The Archbishop speaks about it frequently. And historicism is basically this. I'll give you the definition first of Pope Pius XII. This is Pope Pius XII from encyclical Humani Generis. To that there is added a false historicism, which, devoting itself to the bare events of human life, overthrows the foundations of all truth and all absolute law, in that which concerns as much the philosophy as the Christian dogmas themselves. So, when historicism is applied, it will say this. For example, hell was a great doctrine taught back in the Middle Ages. It was good for the Middle Ages, but now, in modern man, hell is, you don't need hell anymore, because actually everybody goes to heaven as long as you're sincere, and we can coexist to help each other with charity and peace to build a better world. Sound familiar? If you have to throw up, the bathroom is down there to the left. But that is the whole modern jargon. Now apply this, they especially apply historicism to the doctrines on the social kingship of Christ. And they will say, okay, yeah, Pope Pius IX promoted the social kingship of Christ, promoted union of church and state, condemned separation of church and state, but you got to look at it in its context. I'm talking like a modernist now. You got to look at it in its historical context. Back then it was needed because, you still had kings and bourgeois, you still had the dukes, and they had remnants of the old style medieval way of governing. So we can understand that Pope Pius IX will condemn separation of church and state in the 1800s. But now, this is 1960s, the age of democracy. Man has landed on the moon, and we've got cell phones coming in 30 years. So we are modern man, and we don't need to hear about the social kingship of Christ and the reign of Christ. That's obsolete. Do you follow? Mm-hmm. The principles of the faith adapt to the given age. Mm-hmm. That is pure modernism. Mm-hmm. And I am contending, and I can be debated on this, I can be proven wrong on this. But I think it's this poisonous leg of the scorpion, it's that leg of historicism that got into the Society of St. Pius X. Why? Because Bishop Fillet and the superiors, and now the three bishops, to our sadness, And we were just with Bishop Tessier. I repeat, I wish I could say, he's totally with the resistance. He's gonna stand up for the line of tradition like his founder, but it's not the case. And I have to even say, in the course of the conversation, we had to remind him, Your Excellency, religious liberty is not just an error. It is a condemned heresy against the faith. So is ecumenism. And he has already been sliding on this. He had to slide to sign this document, and he had to slide to sign the General Chapter Statement of last July last year. Let me just give you an example. Everyone is looking at paragraph 11, which is true. Paragraph 11 seems to open the door to say, yeah, we want the conversion of Rome, but seeing that's really not going to work, we have got to make a deal so we can have freedom to preach what we want. But let's look at another paragraph. Number 6. Listen to it at first, and it sounds good at first, but then we'll repeat. Religious liberty, as exposed by Dignitatis Humanae in its practical application these last 50 years, logically leads to demanding God-made man to renounce his reign over a man who makes himself God, which is equivalent to dissolving Christ. In the place of a conduct which is inspired by a solid faith in the real power of our Lord Jesus Christ, we see the Church being shamefully guided by human prudence, and with such self-doubt that she asks nothing other from the state than that which the Masonic lodges wish to concede to her, the common law in the midst of and on the same level as other religions which she no longer dares call false. All right, what does that, just that paragraph, what does that sound? Do you think Archbishop Lefebvre would sign this and say this?
No.
What would you say about religious liberty? Very simple and clear.
Heresy.
It's a heresy, and how do we handle it? We stand on the line of all the popes, opposing, condemning it, and rejecting it. And we push for the what? What's the only rebuttal and answer to religious liberty?
The kingship of Christ.
The social kingship of Jesus Christ. Notice that is not worded that way in this document. The social kingship of Christ does not stand out. It mentions the reign of Christ, but a modernist can have the reign of Christ in his heart. But a Catholic doesn't want the reign of Christ just in his heart. He wants the reign of Christ on our government, our political order, our social order, on our flag. But what you get is this is really a wet noodle document. It's a wet noodle document because it's just weak, where it should be saying the truth. But let's analyze this. Just this one thing. Religious liberty as exposed by Dignitatis Humanae, that's the document out of Vatican II, and its practical application these last 50 years, logically leads to God made man to renounce his reign. So religious liberty leads to God renouncing his reign. That's still fuzzy. Because, to use Father Pfeiffer's example, you could say white bread leads to cancer. But many other factors can lead to cancer also. But white bread, you're not saying white bread is the cause of the cancer, but can lead to cancer. And that's what they're doing with religious liberty. Religious liberty leads to God renouncing his reign. Religious liberty leads to cancer. Does that mean religious liberty is the cause of the cancer? No. So what they're doing is deflecting. It fits perfectly in sync with Bishop Villet's interviews. Religious liberty is limited, very limited. It's surmountable. And if you say it leads to the God renouncing his reign, then religious liberty doesn't have to lead to his reign, to renouncing his reign. Which basically is saying religious liberty is not a big deal. It's not so serious a problem. When in fact, religious liberty is a heresy condemned by the Church, and not only dangerous, it is a direct denial of the reign of Christ the King. It doesn't just lead to the abandonment of Christ's kingship, it attacks him directly. And that's just paragraph 6. But do you see how it's so worded? I think it's there must have been the Masonic lodges that helped to write this.
Well, you can tell there's more than one author to it.
It's something diabolic about it.
Shifts.
Yeah, Joshua.
I think even that same paragraph has the term demand, as if it leads to the demand of some sort to the renouncing, as if after Vatican II the prelates just said, "Hey Christ, can you give up your reign?" No,
yeah.
It was they have just uncrowned. That's what he said. Archbishop Brett said.
Yeah, and that's a very it's a strange way to word it. God made man to renounce his reign. Christ is not going to renounce his reign. He's king, whether he likes it or not. He's king. And then furthermore, where it should say the Virgin Mary, notice the Virgin Mary is not mentioned at all either, except on the day it was written, Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And then this phrase, we see the Church being shamefully guided by human prudence, and with such self-doubt that she asks nothing other from the state than that which the Masonic I mean, is this a problem of human prudence in the Church today? What did the Virgin Mary call it? What kind of disorientation will affect the mind? Diabolical. The Virgin Mary will say diabolical. Rome will lose the faith. The smoke of Satan has entered the Church. Well, Paul VI. So, let me just refer to another one. Paragraph 3. Now, this one's really a curveball. Following Archbishop Lefebvre, we affirm that the cause of the grave errors which are in the process of demolishing the Church does not reside in a bad interpretation of the Council text, a hermeneutic of rupture, which would be opposed to a hermeneutic of reform and continuity, but truly in the texts themselves by virtue of the unheard of choice made by Vatican II. Everybody follow that clearly?
No.
It's language, weasel, wish-wash. And this is a masterpiece of wish-wash. It sounds pretty good when you first hear it, because the words are all there. We affirm that the cause of the grave errors, which are in the process of demolishing the Church today, now, are truly in the texts themselves. So, subject, predicate, and object. The cause of the grave errors are in the texts themselves, by virtue of the unheard of choice made by Vatican II. Okay. At first it sounds like the errors are from the texts themselves, but that's not what it says. It should say the errors, the grave errors condemned by the Church are in the texts themselves. That is not what it says. It says the cause of the grave errors are in the texts. Now you got to think about that a little bit, because it's a curveball. To say the poison is in the Pepsi itself is different from saying the cause of the poison is in the Pepsi itself. Because then what's the cause? Is it the ambiguous language? Is it the historic context of Vatican II? So it's very dangerously worded, with a lot of pious padding, as Father Ringrose calls it. But we could go through this, but also the one on the new Mass, it sounds good. But here's its hard-hitting punches on the new Mass. The new Mass, promulgated in 1969, notice it doesn't condemn that the new Mass of April 15th document is legitimately promulgated. It's still on the same line. Nothing in this document has changed. The new Mass, promulgated in 1969, diminishes the affirmation of the reign of Christ by the cross. Indeed, the rite itself curtails and obscures the sacrificial and propitiatory nature of the Eucharistic sacrifice. Pious padding. The new Mass curtails your faith. Does it curtail your faith? Does it obscure the Catholic faith? No, the new Mass directly attacks the sacrificial nature of Christ on the cross and on the altar. It's not just curtails and obscures. But that's just another small example of the wording is so done that how do you compare it? It's like a sledgehammer made of marshmallows. It looks like a sledgehammer at first, but you pick it up and you can't even kill a fly.
It's like the motu proprio, the same thing as the language of the motu proprio, or is also Father.
Oh, the motu proprio motu proprio is horrible.
Horrible.
And we discussed this with Bishop Tessier, because he said, but the motu proprio said the old Mass was never abrogated. All right, that one sentence, okay, but it's totally nullified by everything surrounding it.
Yes, that's right.
Because in the cover letter of that motu proprio, it says you have to accept the new Mass. Mm-hmm. And then it has a blasphemous conclusion to say that both rites are of the same, both forms are of the same rite. So, 20 years ago, at least Rome was a little more honest and said, we don't want the new Mass, the old Mass, we want it totally out. Not to be in St. Peter's or anything. And the indult of John Paul II. Now it's more slippery because it's saying, well, the new Mass is good, the old Mass is good, it's on this equal level, it's both lungs of the same rite.
Father, and there is a big lie there too. Because it was never abrogated. It was abrogated, of course. It was. They prohibited it for many years. That's a lie.
Right, illegal.
From Paul VI, it was abrogated until Benedict XVI.
Illegally, yes.
Illegally, yeah.
Yes. All right. Well, here I just want to give you a few quotes to put this all in view. Remember, starting last year, July 14th. That was the Vatican II in the Society of St. Pius X. Mm-hmm. The shift of doctrine from we will not make a deal with Rome until Rome comes back to tradition. And what does all this have to do? It has to do with the faith. When Rome has the faith, then all right, the wheels can roll. But now the new doctrine is pluralism, indifferentism. We'll join the gang, we'll put up our altar in the pantheon of all the conciliar church altars with the charismatics and the Anglicans and all the other phonies. And we'll have our altar too, as long as we have the right to preach what we want and criticize Vatican II. And it's a total illusion, it's a total lie. But listen to Archbishop Lefebvre. However, it suffices to read the historical exposés of Roger Aubert and John Courtney Murray on religious liberty. Father Murray was the one that wrote the document on religious liberty, going against all of tradition, to establish that they systematically relativize the statements of the magisterium of the popes of the 19th century, according to a principle that can be expressed this way. Every doctrinal pronouncement of the magisterium is strictly relative to its historical context, in such a way that if the context changes, the doctrine can change. And that's exactly what's happening now in the Society of St. Pius X. This document even says, it was good for 1988 for Archbishop Lefebvre to say, no deal until Rome converts to tradition. That was understandable back then because, they were crazy about Assisi and applying Vatican II. But now this Pope is more traditional. Rome is more bent on tradition. Yeah. There's more. One of the priests of the society just about maybe 2 months ago in one of the altars from the pulpits of the USA said there are more Tridentine Masses being said in the Vatican. That shows things are changing. So the historical context thing is the modernist trick to change doctrine. And Archbishop Lefebvre fixed no deal with Rome till Rome goes back to tradition. But now that we're 2012 and 13, historical context has changed, so we can change the principles. And now we can seek an agreement without Rome's conversion. And as it says in here, then it will be the beginning of reestablishing of order. If we can get in there and profess integrally the Catholic faith, and to reject the errors which oppose it, with the right and the duty for us to oppose publicly the errors and proponents of these errors, whoever they may be, which would allow the beginning of a reestablishing of order. That's a repetition of condition 1, which basically says, we want our right to say what we want to, which is pure indifferentism.
Yeah.
And remember, as Father Thomas Aquinas pointed out, Campos and Labarue all said the same thing. We will help, the Pope needs our help. The Church needs our help to get her back on its feet. Now, St. Peter's has been traditional, and they've been with the Church since 1988. Have they converted Rome?
No.
Have they got in there and changed things around?
No.
No. How many ordinations a year they have?
9 in the
You
whole
said
world.
9. Yeah, 9.
Wow.
Wow.
So, listen to this.
Sorry, well, excuse me, Father. I
Yeah.
was looking at a picture, an ordination in Catalonia, in Spain, in 1960. No, 1955. There were 800 ordinations.
eight.
One day, 800
In one day.
ordinations.
Where?
In Catalonia, in Spain.
I know you
What
see
year?
a lot of those
It was
pictures. and it's just
55.
fields of priests,
1955, 800 in one day. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen pictures like
Now
that.
it's down to 8.
Yes, yeah, right. But they're gonna fix everything, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once they build that seminary, everybody's just gonna come running.
It's like
They're-
a
yeah,
Disney World.
yeah, the Disney World seminary. Yeah.
All right, here's Archbishop Lefebvre again, repeating about this historical context, modernism. A certain liberal evolutionism tries to obscure these immutable truths by building a theology of the historical evolution of doctrine based on a historical relativism of this doctrine. Back again to clarify, this means that truth can change according to the historical context. So hell was good for the Middle Ages. We don't have to believe that today. But that's precisely why in the 70s the bishops were really preaching this. That the devil, well, that's a myth. Hell is a myth. The modernists were really preaching this. And that's why in Germany, Anneliese Michel, her confessor says someday she will probably be canonized. She's the girl that offered herself to Christ as a victim, to be possessed by the devil and killed by him, to show the modern world the devil exists. He is not a joke. And the devil took possession of her. Many devils couldn't drive the devils out. And whenever she had, in her heart, she was a victim. It's a strange thing, but that's just what her confessor said.
What was her name?
Anneliese Michel. The movie about her recently that was based on her story was called, about 8 years ago, The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Oh,
And it's based on a true story. And the movie is kind of, it's kind of mitigated because she was worse than portrayed even in the movie. And the devil ended up beating her and starving her to death and killing her. But it was a message to the world, hey, the hell is real and the devil exists. But, okay. According to this theory, we can always attribute to any teaching of the Church, most particularly its political doctrine on the kingship of Christ. This is what they hate most, the liberals. They hate the social reign of Christ. It's political, an essential historical condition resulting from the historical period during which that doctrine was elaborated and promulgated. The consequence is that since one new historical climate follows another, the doctrine of the Church is forced to change and find new foundations. So again, and Cardinal Ratzinger even said this, the syllabus of errors of Pius IX, which condemns separation of church and state and the idea that all religions are vessels of salvation, that was clearly condemned. And he said Vatican II is an anti-syllabus. In other words, what was good for Pius IX's day was good for his day. It was true back then, but now we have to adapt to the modern man. You see how deadly, and now the doctrine changes. So the union of church and state, the social kingship of Christ, are all, well, that has to change now. And that's the deadly, deadly heresy of today. The consequence is that the truth changes. That is why religious liberty, which was condemned by the popes of the 19th century, Bishop Tessier, remember this, because he was starting to excuse this, it was condemned by the popes of the 19th century because of its premises of absolute liberalism and rationalism, which should now allegedly be rehabilitated in the name of human dignity. This is also why the relations between the temporal and the spiritual order should allegedly be revised at a time during which the monarchy of a sacred type of the Middle Ages and of the Reformation has been replaced today by a democratic and social state. Not only was the condemnation of religious liberty motivated by its intrinsic opposition to the immutable doctrine of which we spoke, but the idea that a change of foundation can justify a change of doctrine falls squarely under the condemnation of Pius XII. Where Pius XII says, there is also a kind of false historicism which attends only to events of human life and smashes the foundations of all truth and absolute law, not only insofar as it pertains to the philosophical matters, but to Christian teachings as well. So that's Pius XII in Humani Generis condemning that idea that what was good for Pius IX's age, Christ the King, union of church and state, doesn't apply now. And Vatican II, the religious liberty, attacks directly the social kingship of Christ, calls for the separation of church and state, calls for the allowing all the states to be neutral on matters of religion, which is suicide of a country. It's atheism in action. Example, you will let all religions have a right to publicly spread their garbage in the state, in the country, and the state says, well, the state is neutral on matters of religion. The passing of that Sodom and Gomorrah bill just a few weeks ago is a logical consequence. Mm-hmm. And the next logical consequence is Satanism, acknowledged and publicized and promoted. And then in another talk, Archbishop Lefebvre in 1990, one of his last conference, 7 months before he died. It's a great conference. And here he talks about Cardinal Ratzinger being sneaky. And it's about that there are decisions of the magisterium which cannot be and are not intended to be the last word on the matter as such. This is Cardinal Ratzinger. But are a substantial anchorage in the problem. And then Archbishop Lefebvre says, their cardinal is an artful dodger. We would say, a sneaky little dog. So there are decisions of the magisterium, that is not just any decisions, which cannot be the last word on the matter as such, but are merely of substantial anchorage. Notice the type of wording that these modernists use is exactly what the wording that Menzinger is using now. What's substantial anchorage? Call a black spade a black spade. Stop dancing with all these words. Pious padding. Mm-hmm. The Cardinal continues, quote, and they are first and foremost an expression of pastoral prudence, a sort of provisional disposition. The Archbishop then says, listen, definitive decisions of the Holy See being turned into provisional dispositions? In other words, the solid doctrine of the Church, defined and errors condemned against it, are now just pious opinions? The cardinal goes on, quote, their core remains valid, but the individual details influenced by the circumstances of the time may need further rectification. In this regard, one can refer to the statements of the popes during the last century on religious freedom, as well as the anti-modernist decisions at the beginning of this century, especially the decisions of the Biblical Commission of that time. This is packed with stuff. It's packed. But basically what Archbishop Lefebvre is saying again, here. Those are the decisions the cardinal could not digest. The anti-modernist oath, the decisions on the Biblical Commission saying Adam and Eve, whoever says they are a myth, let them be condemned. Whoever says Noah's Ark in the book of Genesis is just a nice way of explaining human history, condemned. And social reign of Christ the King and separation of church and state to be condemned. Cardinal Ratzinger is saying, well, that's historical context. That goes for the early century. And do you follow what I'm saying? It's slippery. It's truly from hell. It's truly demonic. Hence, the three definitive statements of the magisterium may be put aside because they were only provisional, according to Cardinal Ratzinger. Listen to the cardinal who goes on to say that these anti-modernist decisions of the church rendered a great service in their day. So they were good for their day. By, quote, warning against hasty and superficial adaptations. And, quote, by keeping the church from sinking into the liberal bourgeois world. But the details of the determinations of their contents were later superseded once they had carried out their pastoral duty on a particular moment. That's from the Osservatore Milano, July 2nd, 1990. So, says Archbishop Lefebvre, we turn over the page and say no more about them. So you see how the cardinal has got out of the accusation of going a bit far when he calls Vatican II an anti-syllabus, when he opposes the pontifical decisions in the magisterium of the past. He found a way out. The core remains valid, he said. And Archbishop Lefebvre says, what core? No idea. So there he has weaseled his way out of the difficulty. And, I mean, what I am contending today here in this catechism is this disease of historicism, which is one of the tentacles of modernism, is one of the main footholds of modernism now in the Society of St. Pius X. Because they are saying what was good for Archbishop Lefebvre back in 88, to go ahead with the consecrations and all that. Well, you know, the church was different. Now the historical context is different, and we don't have to stand anymore on truth first, agreements follow. Now we can have agreement and truth can be discussed about later. And that is truly deadly. Yes?
I just wanted to say, along with all the errors there in the historicity that you've just been discussing, you know, that you can almost think of the futuricity arguments I hear a lot at church against some people who sort of acknowledge that the resistance is good, but, you know, anyway, it winds up, there's two things I hear a lot which are very inconsistent. And one of them is that as soon as we get an agreement with Rome, the masses are just going to flood into tradition. Yeah. You know, and then you know, that's almost the way to make it seem. And then the other thing is, if that's going to happen, why do we need the agreement? Because we don't need to convert Rome. You know, there's an inconsistency there. If we got to go in to the regular church because we got to convert them, and I've asked them, I said, well, where are all these saints that's going to convert all these people? You know, they can't really tell me. But then, you know, it goes from that to being the gates are going to just. I mean, we can't build enough traditional churches fast enough. You know, I'm not saying maybe not quite that exaggerated, but it's almost like that's what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it's, if you think back to Vatican II, it sounds like, oh, it's the springtime. You know, it's as soon as we get this agreement, all these folks are going to flood. We're going to have to build more traditional churches.
Springtime-itis.
Springtime of Vatican II.
I remember after the Motu Proprio, Father Novak gave a sermon. In his sermon, he told everybody, now if we have this Motu Proprio, you're going to see a lot of faces here. Women might be wearing pants, and men might be wearing jeans and T-shirts. They're going to be coming here, and just be charitable towards them. This is all new to them. I don't remember one single new face.
Did it happen?
Yeah. No.
Did it happen? It's springtime-itis. It's springtime-itis, and the society caught it. And the young priests are promoting this. They're pushing. We got to get with Rome because we'll convert it from within. We'll be the leaven in the dough. But that's what the modernists were saying back then in the 70s. We'll be the leaven in the dough and revive the church from within to adapt to the new Pentecost. So, one last quote from the great Archbishop Lefebvre, who I asked Father for. He was one of the bishops to be. Archbishop Lefebvre asked Father Michel Faure, will you please accept to be consecrated a bishop? He declined out of humility and suggested Father Galaretta.
And why did he leave the society?
He never left. Well, he's with the resistance, and he's starting a priory in France. And he signed the last two documents, one in Brazil and one in Virginia. And he was at the 25th anniversary with Bishop Williamson in Virginia. And he was there. He's solid. And he built up all of South America, the seminary, the priories, all the missions. And I asked him, Father, if Archbishop Lefebvre was alive now, what would he be doing? He says, without a doubt, without any doubt whatsoever, he would be with the resistance. And the more you read him, the society is promoting a lot of his books, which is good because everything he says condemns exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what's fun.
But here, Archbishop Lefebvre, and I'll close around this. But the annoying thing is that the liberals themselves practice this system in the text of the schemas. Assertion of an error, or an ambiguity, or a dangerous orientation. Then, immediately after or before, an assertion in the opposite direction, intended to tranquilize the conservative conciliar fathers. That's the tactic of these snakes. Say something liberal, and then in the same paragraph, counterpose a conservative traditional statement. And that's what this is full of. This is full of that talk.
Back and forth.
Full of this. The weakening of faith, paragraph 8. The weakening of faith in our Lord's divinity favors a dissolution of the unity of authority in the Church by introducing a collegial, egalitarian, and democratic spirit. See Lumen Gentium. Christ is no longer the head from which everything flows, in particular the exercise of authority. The Supreme Pontiff, who no longer exercises effectively the fullness of his authority, and the bishops who, contrary to the teaching of Vatican I, esteem that they can collegially and habitually share the fullness of the supreme power, commit themselves thereby with the priests to listen to and follow the people of God, the new sovereign. This represents the destruction of authority, and in consequence the ruin of Christian institutions, families, seminaries, religious institutes. No. Well, all this is saying the problem is the authority is being attacked. The authority. Here it says the weakening of faith, but about 7 times it mentions about authority. So the problem of the loss of the faith, the problem of collegiality, the problem of the destruction of the families, seminaries, and religious institutes is the problem of authority. And what this paragraph does is put authority over the faith. But what is the real cause of the problem of the breakdown of authority? The breakdown of the family, seminaries, and religious institutes. Anybody? It's the loss of what?
Faith.
The faith. The faith, the faith, the faith. And this is what these new documents, they take that style of ambiguity and then this historical context, historicism, is just deadly. So, in summary, this document of the three bishops, nothing has changed. Nothing's changed. And ecumenism, here, in the name of the ubiquitous ecumenism, and of a vain interreligious dialogue, Nostra Aetate, the truth about the one true church is silenced. Sounds kind of good at first, right? But theologians and the priests of the society should know better, and the bishops especially. This ecumenism is not just silent about the one true church. It denies the one true church. It attacks the one true church. So do you see the subtlety of the language? It's really sneaky. It's really clever. This ecumenism has thus literally killed the missionary spirit through a false seeking of false unity, too often reducing the mission of the church to that of delivering a message. But this ecumenism doesn't just kill the missionary spirit. It directly kills souls. It directly kills the faith. So when you look at the wording, religious liberty, ecumenism, and the errors of the council, this fits what Bishop Fillet said. The errors of the council are not really from the council, but from the general interpretation thereof. Because the way it's worded deflects, the errors are not really in the council, but the cause of the errors, whatever that is. And whatever that means, the unheard of decision. By virtue of the unheard of choice made by Vatican II. Well, what is that? As Father Pfeiffer says, if you wrote this on a catechism test, you get a straight F.
Yeah.
But do you all see what's happening here? The error of the historicism, saying that truth was good for then, but now truth can change. And Father Thiemann basically said that in his talk. The historical circumstances are different now, so the truth, the prudential truth, whatever that is different now. He says truth can change. And that's pure modernism. Imagine the airplane engineers saying, well, the Wright brothers, they believed 2 + 2 was 4. They got the plane off the ground. That was good for back then. But now we have to build our planes on the principle that 2 + 2 is 7. How many of you are going to fly in that plane?
And he said it with such authority, too. That's what got me about the conference thing.
Yeah.
One of I think that the actual brochure starts off with a quote from Pontius Pilate. What is truth? But anyway, a friend of mine pointed that out. But another one there, some people I can't understand exactly, but they have pointed out that the society has been over the last few months it started sounding a little more liberal, let's say, and then toward the conciliar church. And now it's been the last few months is sounding much more conservative. Maybe like some examples you've given here.
It sounds like they realized that last year we went too far, and now too many people don't trust us. So now we have to walk it back a little bit and try and sound more.
Along with two, I think that the if they start sounding more conservative, then there's not as much need for us to come here. I mean, right. so it works both. I think they sort of realize, well, we may be driving a few more people away, so we're going to try to make the resistance unnecessary or sound unnecessary.
Well, when I told folks about that you'd be here August 11th at St. Anthony's, they told me, oh, well, didn't you just read the
Declaration.
The declaration? Well, everything's okay now. We don't need to go.
You know what the big success of this declaration really was? Who was the big pillar opposing all this?
Bishop Williamson?
Well, no, he's clear.
All right.
Who was the other big pillar opposing all
Bishop
this?
Mallory.
Bishop Tessier. They got him. That was the victory. They won him over.
Yeah.
Now they think they'll go ahead towards Rome. They got him on their side. And when we walked in and talked to him, I said to Father Pfeiffer, how is it possible that we can leave visiting for 2 hours with a prince of the Catholic Church and one chosen by Archbishop Lefebvre to defend tradition, and we leave that 2-hour meeting not sure where in the world he stands on the most important questions of heaven and hell, of our eternal salvation and souls? How is this possible?
Is he just tired of fighting?
I don't know. I think he caved in on that last July, and he's certainly on lockdown. You can really see that.
Because, like, as I know people who at St. Anthony's, who I've always respected as very knowledgeable and really go-to people about tradition. And the one person in particular said, I'm tired of fighting. He said, I just want a place I can take my family to Mass on Sunday and know it's a valid Mass.
Right. And that's easy.
But after what's happened over the last year and a half, I'm convinced that my presence is not necessary there every Sunday. Period. It just isn't. It just really isn't.
Yeah, we stopped as
I
well.
mean-
We're no longer.
I mean, they're no better than the insult now.
Yeah,
And what
it's
our
better than
last
the
priest said was that, they said that, if we get close to an agreement, some people who were here for superficial reasons, they'll leave, and actually just the opposite has happened. That the people who need their weekly dose of smells and bells, they're going to keep coming no matter what. But the more militant treads are the ones who are really dispirited by all this. They're the ones who are.
Yeah.
Not the ones who are here for superficial reasons, who wanted a conservative atmosphere, who want their priests to sound more like the people they hear on Fox News. Those people are perfectly happy.
Yeah, I know. Yes. Does God want us to stop fighting?
Yeah.
No. He wants us to go into a whole new surge. I don't. It's not we who determine the battle strategies. It's God. And He's put us into a whole new. Well, that's why we're here.
Somebody else said, does society really have to keep beating people over the head with Rome's errors? I mean, we're all here because we get it. We're here because we know Rome is on the wrong path. We don't need to get beat over the head by it every Sunday, every week after week. And I stole your line and I said, well, what good is a guard dog when the guard dog stops barking?
Yep.
We'll just
Yeah,
take him
thieves.
out back and shoot him.
In some places, thieves break in every day.
The priest's job to sound the alarm.
Absolutely.
And he just got kind of quiet.
Yes.
Now, well, like along the lines of that, people are so easy to get complacent, especially about the virtues. And I remember reading from Saint Leonard that the priest has to keep repeating over and over and over again the virtues, even if it's just the same sermon over and over again on humility. It's because people get complacent very easy. 1 week without a sermon, maybe as strong as before, and all of a sudden, all virtue goes out the window. And I really think the more I read, especially the 3 bishops' own words when they give conferences or sermons, it's almost like they have no self-respect. They have no self-confidence because they've been hammered with this, come home, come out of the cold, we're very nice, come into the trenches, you're unhurt, you're unharmed, we need your help. And for years they've been hammered by this, and I think they're finally believing the lie becomes the truth, like an Orwellian truth. That they actually believe that they're outside the church. They actually believe that they are rebel spirits.
And on that, getting back to maybe the beginning of the crisis, I don't know, however you want it. But, if this idea that the lifting of excommunications, was it really more of a strategy on the part of both parties during these negotiations, or was it truly a miracle? The question almost answers itself, but I'd like to hear you say what you think about that.
Well, I got to catch a plane, but Bishop Follet, when did he say this? It was around that time. He said, we want 2 signs from Rome. lift excommunications, and lift the abrogation of the Mass. If these two signs are given us, it's a sign that Rome is coming back to tradition, and we can start discussions again. Rome did it. They granted those fables. That's what it is, fables. The lifting of excommunication that never existed, and the lifting of an abrogation of the Mass that never was there.
At the conference they had a few years ago, somebody asked Bishop Fillet, well, how come they didn't lift the excommunication on Archbishop Lefebvre and Castro Meyer? And he said, well, if you read the whole document, at the bottom of the document or somewhere in the document it says, and all penalties associated with this are now lifted. And so he told the crowd that also, although it didn't spell it out, if all the penalties are lifted, then that means they were also lifted off of Archbishop Lefebvre and the Castellators.
I mean, if you want to get technical, the church law is always technical, and it has to be specified.
Right.
So because of that, they began the 2-year discussions. And after the discussions, we hear from Bishop Fillet in 2012, March, the discussions prove that Rome doesn't have the faith, and they prove fruitless. However, we have to now have a new attitude towards Rome and a new approach. And no longer the bulldozer approach, he says, but a prudential approach. And that's where he applies prudence dictates we have to try to make an agreement without Rome's conversion. But I repeat again and again and again, and I'll close with this. The catch is that's deceiving many people is, well, there's no agreement yet, so what's the trouble? The problem is the very poison that's swallowed by making an agreement has already been swallowed. Mm-hmm. Accepting Vatican II and the light of tradition, accepting the new Mass as legitimately promulgated, accepting the new Code of Canon Law and the new profession of faith. Once you accept that, you're done. You're gone.
That's absolutely right.
You're dead. And we're dead. The society's dead as far as that's concerned.
That's right.
And that's why I asked Bishop Tessier when we left, Father Piper and I both said, Your Excellency, he said, well, I think it's better to wait and see. And then we said, wait and see. Souls are being devoured by the wolves. Souls are going to hell. They're losing their faith because of the silence. Please do your duty as a bishop and oppose Bishop Fillet on this destruction of tradition. And my last words to him, 2 cents worth they were Your Excellency, we all await the sheep are waiting for the voice of the shepherd, and for you to stand out, stand up. So pray for him. Pray for him. But anyway, we got to fight on. And
would it help if we wrote him a letter?
Yes, it would.
I did
It
that.
would. I encourage all of you to write a letter.
I already did it.
And just say respectfully, look, this society is dead and dying. And are you going to watch the society that you helped found, helped start, helped keep the fight for 42 years, you're going to let it now die? And it's not really the society that's the issue here, it's the faith. It's Rome that must convert. The Archbishop always had that intention.
There are families, tons of families that don't come to St. Anthony's anymore. They go to the indult Mass, they went back to the Nova Scotia parish. Granted, there was part of the cult of Novak. Father Novak had a charisma about him where people went and when he left, it was obvious that the people who were there just because of him kind of trickled away. Right. But there are families who had been there for years after he was gone that now go to St. Anne's for the indult Mass, or they go back to the Nova Scotia parish. Because that idea of the faith is no longer, pounded out. The guard dog is no longer barking.
Yeah, I know. There's a SSPX pastor in the U.S. that says, you can go to the indult Mass, no problem.
Yeah,
that's a lie.
Father, this new priest, Father Jose Antonio Iglesias, the was ordained conditionally for Bishop Williamson in England. He was ordained. Where is he coming from?
I don't know anything about him.
No?
But we'll find out. Father Piper's there in Ireland. He's going to meet up with him this weekend. Okay, well, we'll say a prayer. I'll give you a blessing and battle on, folks. Battle on. We haven't yet resisted unto blood, says St. Paul. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now at the hour of our death. Amen.
Saint Pius X,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Saint Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, Sanctus et Semper. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.